So we're going to get started, and I want to say welcome to Startup Grind. I want everyone, I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here tonight. Some of you have been to Startup Grind, so you kind of have a sense, and I see a lot of new faces. So I'm going to just chat a little bit about what Startup Grind is and kind of why I do what I do. Startup Grind is a global startup community. We are in 365 cities, we're in 115 countries, and our goal is to educate, inspire, and connect entrepreneurs. And so we do that as an organization. We're based in Mountain View, California. We are partnered with Google for Entrepreneurs, which is pretty fun for us. And so we want to make the journey, the startup journey, easier, less lonely. What I found here in Albany along the way is that it's not just about startups. It's about business in general. There are a lot of commonalities. And I interact with a lot of small businesses, medium-sized businesses, as well as startup communities. So I invite you to stay tuned. Some of you here know our special guest speaker. I'm so excited that she has agreed to spend time with us tonight. And I'm talking about, of course, the wonderful Cindy Applebaum, who is the market president, and she is the publisher of the Albany Business Review, which is an American business publication, American Business Journal publication. So we at Startup Grind believe that everyone should have at least one standing ovation in their life. We like to do it in the beginning. So I would invite you all to rest on your feet and help me to welcome Cindy Applebaum.
My one and only standing ovation.
I find that hard to believe.
No, it's not hard to believe.
We'll do another one before we wrap up, so you can say you have it too. So, I'm just so excited, Cindy, to have you here. We've talked. We had an opportunity to talk a couple times, and I've been a fan of the Business Review for quite some time. I know
you,
that
Mike.
the publication, yes, indeed, Mike Hendricks. We've got just some familiar faces here in the audience, and I love that the Business Review is a publication that I can always go to. I can find out what is happening, up and coming things. I get the wonderful edition every day. I get a nice email every day that kind of gives me top of the news with companies. So I can always get the pulse of new companies, which is wonderful for me, but also the events that are coming on. You do some wonderful events, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. But I just want to say thank you. I just want to start with thank you. You have a very interesting story. I think some folks know part of the story, and what I hope that we're going to do tonight is help you to look at your story perhaps from a different perspective, but maybe to share some information about you in a way that folks who know you may not have heard yet. So I like to start at the beginning. It's a pretty good place to start, and we'll bounce back and forth a little bit. But I kind of like to ask, when you were growing up, was there someone that you saw either in your family, in a neighborhood, who either was a business owner or someone that was doing their own thing? I know that the term entrepreneur is a relatively new term, but was there someone that you saw as a role model?
I'd like to be able to say yes.
I want you to tell me.
But I can't.
Yeah.
I grew up in North Albany, which now I guess they refer to it as nowhere, which is very offensive.
Indeed.
Yes, but it was we lived in government subsidized housing, and I think the thing that really was something that I deeply engaged with was the tightness of the community. We were all very, very close, and we were all poor, but nobody knew it.
Sure.
Because we're all poor.
Sure.
But for the most part, the families that lived there, if there was a father in the family, it was either a police officer or a fireman, and most of the moms were stay-at-home moms. My mother was a single mother, so she worked, and just people in the neighborhood just took care of my brothers and I. It was the most amazing thing. But I'd like to say no, I didn't get that until I started my career, where I really people began to connect with me because of my level, my energy level, and my desire to learn.
Right. Well, what's interesting about what you said is that although, as you look at your kind of growing up, although you didn't have perhaps a role model per se, it would seem, as I've talked to many successful business leaders, that undergirding that you received are actually some of those foundational things that prepare one. And that family knit where you kind of knew everyone. I smiled when you were talking because although I'm an Army brat, and so we traveled a lot, there was a few periods where my dad was deployed abroad and we stayed in the States, where there were those neighborhoods where you really didn't get away with much of anything because your mom might not be there, but there certainly was someone who was quite ready to stand in proxy to make sure that things got taken care of. But it can really build that a sense of confidence that there's always someone that has your back. And those are really a lot of the qualities that as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as an executive, as you've been, and you've seen, those are the kind of qualities that are very important. So you grew up in this a neighborhood where everyone kind of knew each other, the families knew each other, and then you branched. Did you go away to college, or?
Nope.
Did you go
Actually, it's probably my only real regret in life is that I did not get a college degree. And I went to, and not being offensive because I am Catholic.
Yes.
And I've kind of forgiven the priests. But when I went to my high school guidance counselor, I thought I wanted to be a school teacher. And I'm so glad that I did not do that. But I said, we didn't have resources, we didn't know, and I thought that's what he was there for, to help. And he basically said, not helping you, you're gonna be just like the rest of them, you'll get pregnant, and no, not putting my time and effort into you. I didn't go to him once, I went to him 3 times, and all 3 times I got the same answer. So when I graduated high school and I wasn't going to college, my mother was like, well, you gotta go get a job. And it was fair to her. It was the only fair thing to her. So I wound up working in actually my first job out of high school, interviewing for weeks, and everybody's saying, well, we're really looking for somebody with more experience. So it was, I think, July 3rd of 1972, and I had been going on interviews for about 2 weeks. And I went into a small savings and loan. I had a scheduled interview, and I was meeting with the president of the bank. It was a very small bank, so the vice president, the president, everybody was right there in this little area. And I got the same thing from him. Well, I really like you, but I'm really looking for somebody with more experience, and I had just had it.
Sure.
And I said, how do you expect somebody like me to get experience if people like you won't hire me? And he sat there and he said, okay, you're hired. So again, working for a small financial institution, they were very anxious to teach me, and I was very anxious to learn. So I really got my college degree there. The CFO, I would stay at night and he would teach me the accounting. And the gentleman that ran the operations would teach me the operational side of the business. And I wound up running the operational side of the business probably 2 years later because the assistant vice president unfortunately took ill. Small bank, I was it.
Sure.
And it was exciting.
So it sounds to me that even then, even without experience per se, if we can call it employment experience, you had enough experience to be able to realize and make that stipulation of that, the chicken or the egg. How can you need experience, but how can I get experience if no one will give me experience? But you had a voice even then. And I think that is something, as I look at your story, and I think we'll try to pull that out a little bit. But even back then, you had a voice that you weren't afraid to use. It was a voice that was speaking for yourself at that point. But as we've traveled along, and as you'll share, it's a voice that's become a voice for others as well. So you had this wonderful opportunity. You came into, it sounds like, a really wonderful place once you got in the door, because it was small enough for you to really be able to learn many different things, and then to be able to very quickly step into an opening when it occurred. So you stayed there, you kind of cut your chops, cut your eye teeth at that position. As you were in that position and as you were growing, what were the kind of things that you were learning, not task-oriented, but as you began to think about, okay, I know how to do these things, so now I'm looking at what my next opportunity might look like.
It really was the opportunity to be independent. Nobody stood over me and did anything. They didn't check my work. It was the most amazing thing in the world. They just trusted
Especially
me.
when it was financial.
And this is before computers. This is back in the day where when you went into the bank to make a deposit, you still had, I'm dating myself, but you had ledger cards.
Yeah.
And we would, at the end of the day, have to balance everything out. And there was a computer place in Framingham, Massachusetts, and we'd send everything down there. And these great big computer printout sheets would come back, and you'd have to go through and say yes, yes, yes. But I think the fact that these folks saw something in me that I don't think I had not yet seen in myself, and they were willing to invest their time. They were willing to share their knowledge, and they encouraged me. And I can't say up to that point in my life I had any of that. I went to Catholic school, and I think what I got out of that was a fear of failure, because if you didn't succeed, if you didn't pass the tests, if they had rules.
Right.
And out would come the metal ruler. And these are true stories. Out would come the metal ruler.
Right.
And my 7th and 8th grade nun actually had little holes in hers.
Oh dear. Aerodynamic.
Yeah, when you got hit with the ruler, it just kind of stuck.
Sure.
And I can remember in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I was one of the elementary school's best spellers. I was expected to never have a bad day and always win the spelling bees. They were really big on spelling bees.
Right.
And if I lost the spelling bee, boom, boy, that ruler would come out.
Sure.
So I think that instilled in me a fear of failure, balanced with, as much as I enjoyed my upbringing in North Albany, I felt safe, I felt loved, I was surrounded by people that cared for me. I still didn't want to be in that for my life. And the one thing I always knew was I knew I was always going to be a mother.
Right.
One way or another, I was going to be a mother.
Sure.
And I wanted my children to have something different. Now I look back on that and I say, how stupid was I? What a great way it would have been for them to have been raised in the city and had the opportunity to experience diversity and a different culture, and being able to just be more inclusive.
Right.
Where when you're in the burbs,
Right.
doesn't necessarily happen. It's very cliquish.
It's a different thing in
Yeah.
the suburbs. It certainly is. And yet, the pathway that you took, the journey that you were on, really has brought you around in a way that has given you, from a very fledgling opportunity. Now you are in a position where you are giving others opportunity.
Yeah.
You are really leading an organization where you are determining the tone. We know for your industry, media, there are many voices that are biased. As a journalist, what I learned is that here's a side of a story, there's a side of a story. I'm going to give that to the audience and trust that the audience has enough wherewithal to be able to choose for themselves, and that's not what we see. And yet you went from having a fear of failure, and I like the way you said balance, because you didn't tip completely over where a fear of failure almost paralyzed you, but it almost activated you and moved you forward to what was next.
Actually, same bank. I was with them for a long time. And I worked for 302 Central Avenue, Central Savings and Loan Association. And I had been with them maybe 6 years, 5-6 years. And of course, mergers and acquisitions. And at the time, there were very small banks, and you had the city banks of the world that were growing by leaps and bounds. And so some of the smaller banks, especially the savings and loans, had to start growing. So there were a lot of mergers. They wound up being acquired by a Savings and Loan Association out of Rochester, First Federal Savings and Loan Association. And I'll never forget the day that the deal was consummated, and in walks all of the men in their navy blue suits and their red ties, and they don't talk to anybody, and they walk to the back of the building, which is where the boardroom was. And one by one, they start calling everybody to the back of the building.
Oh dear.
And then people would come out and they'd be crying. Their job just got eliminated.
Sure.
So I'm like, all right, when is my turn coming?
Right.
It started at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's now 3:30 in the afternoon.
Oh.
Finally, my name gets called. And up to this point in time, nobody had been saved. And my name had been called. And I go in the back, and basically they said, we're going to keep you. And we're going to do a migration of the mortgage loans. So that's what I was doing. I was running a mortgage portfolio for them, servicing a mortgage portfolio for them. And we're going, now computers are becoming, this is now early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. And they're going to migrate everything to a computer system. They needed me there to help with that process. So that was a year-long process. Then I'm sweating it out a little bit. I'm thinking, well, should I start looking for a job?
Right.
What should I do?
What's going to happen?
My boss calls me up one day. He was in Rochester, and he said to me, we want you to go into sales. Selling what? I work for a bank.
Indeed.
And
Indeed.
he said, selling mortgages.
Huh.
And I
Okay.
said, what? And so, you know, back in the day, Mike would remember this, when you wanted, Paula, you would remember this, when you wanted to get a mortgage, you just went into the bank that you had the relationship with, your deposits with, and literally you filled out about 5 or 6 lines. Cindy Applebaum, I live here, this is the house I want to buy, my bank accounts are here, and the application, I actually was going out appraising real estate back in the 70s with a camera. I would take photos of them, never went inside of them. Yep, nice piece of property, sure, we'll lend on this, and board of directors, yep, sign them, deal. People would come in, hand them a check. Well, now the whole industry was beginning to shift, and I had to go out and drum up the business. I had to call on realtors. I didn't even know what the hell a realtor did at the time.
Right.
I guess I did, but, and at the time I was making $16,000 a year. I thought that was a lot of money.
Right.
And I think I was bringing home, I don't know, $65.89 a week. Maybe, So maybe I wasn't quite making $16,000. And so my boss is telling me I'm going to commission.
Oh dear.
And I'm like, oh no, I'm not. I'm not going to commission. And we had a big debate over it. And I said, no, seriously, if you want me to do this, I'll do it. I am not going on commission.
Right.
And he said, I'll tell you what, stay on, we'll reevaluate, stay on with your base salary, we'll reevaluate 6 months later. Well, I was the number one, so they were doing this across all of upstate New York. They had branches in Albany, Syracuse, Buffalo, and Rochester. They were very dominant in Western New York. So within 6 months, I was their number one salesperson. And so my boss comes down to Albany and he sits down and he says to me, you would have made $42,000 had you taken advantage of this.
Right, of the commission
Like,
structure.
wow, I know, but what about tomorrow? What about 6 months from now?
Sure.
They were such a great company to work for. They paid me the money. They took,
Oh, wow.
you know, they took away the $8,000 that I
Sure.
made on my base salary,
Sure.
and they said, here, we're going to pay you this. And I went on, and I was consistently their number one performer, calling on realtors. And I learned very quickly that my Monday through Friday, I had to be in real estate offices because that's where the business was coming from. It was changing. Saturdays and Sundays, I would sit and take the mortgage applications. And so I did what I had to do. It was a great learning experience. It was fun. I was on the cusp of the industry.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, again, what I find very interesting about what we've heard so far is that although on paper people probably wouldn't say Cindy Applebaum, market president and publisher, aka entrepreneur, and yet throughout each thing that you've said, there's a constant. Your voice was always there. You, for someone who didn't come with a lot of experience, work experience, what you believed in standing for yourself, and your boss was attempting twice to shift you into another, and you were very, no, that's not, and so that very entrepreneurial.
in the approach, and standing for that. And those are the things that even today you are in terms of standing. We've talked about your people and the culture that you're very culture driven. And even, as we move from there and move to some of your other executive positions with Citibank and Time Warner, it sounds as if not only do you have a clear innate sense of what you were going to do, who you were. Yes, I'm going to do this, and in a very respectful way, but also you carried yourself in a way. Your work ethic was such that your supervisors saw things in you that from 10 to 3 o'clock, people were getting their walking papers, but at 3 o'clock there was a change when they asked you to stay.
Yeah.
And so as you took that into these other positions, what I know about you is that every position, every company that you've had a leadership role in, and even, I'm not sure that the sales position initially was a leadership role, but you turn it into a leadership role, and then you create that upswell for the bottom line. And it always has to do with people. So talk about, when did you realize the importance of people?
Well, a couple of things that I would point out. I have always believed, right from day one, I was always grateful that the president of that savings and loan gave me that opportunity. And I've always held firm and fast on, I truly believe that it is my responsibility to give more than my employer expects. And so, and to this day I do that. And so I think that that's always been a big driver for me. I think for me, I really enjoyed selling, much more so than I ever thought I would. And I think a lot of it is because, I went from making $16,000 a year, and all of a sudden I'm making $42,000 a year, when back in the 80s, that's a lot. By the time 79, 81 rolled around, I was 6 figures.
Wow.
And I mean, who would have thought this, little brat from North Albany would be making 6 figures without a college education. And it was something that I valued greatly. And so I wanted to continue learning. When I was recruited by Citibank to go in, and ironically, when I went to Citibank, they didn't want me to sell. They wanted me to, they had a complete disaster in their mortgage division, their operations side, and they wanted me to go in and clean it up. But they didn't want to terminate the guy that was going to be my boss, which was the problem. He was the problem, and they knew it, but they didn't want to.
So working around.
It was interesting. So I went in there. I couldn't get anything done because he was the boss. He just wanted to do things his way, which I respected that. But Citibank was at the time, we did a lot of entertaining, and we were always invited to the parties. And I happened to be with the president of Citibank for upstate New York, not Walter Reed, but his sort of guy up in upstate New York. And I was with him one night, and I said to him, I really feel I need to go back to school. I need to go and I need to get a degree. And he said, Cindy, you have earned your college education for all that you've accomplished. And he said to me, he said, I don't see you ever not making it in life. You'll have hiccups, but you just have something about you that will keep you moving forward. And that has really truly proven to be true. And Paula is one of my very dear friends and probably knows my entire life story. And
filling in the blanks.
Yeah, and has been there to pick me up off of the floor a lot. So, I can't get away with doing the glossy edition here because she'll pull me out on it. But so I think it was just people along the way believed in me and were comfortable telling me that. And then I just think my work ethic, which is very strong, and my, again, that Catholic, that instilling of that fear. I went to church one day for to do my, what is it, confession.
Uh-huh.
And I was going to Blessed Sacrament. Then you never know which priest you're going to get. And I like Father Bradley. You know, I've known Father Bradley since I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And he was one I usually liked because he was pretty easy as a priest. So this one day, I get Father Lefevre from St. Mary's. I don't know if anybody knows. He's retired now. He was my high school principal.
Oh dear.
I wasn't really not his favorite in high school. I bucked the system a lot, and but we had just such a great conversation. And here again, this person probably had bad memories of me in high school, and yet he sat there with open arms and just reaffirmed that I was on the right track in life. I didn't do anything bad in high school, just
Right.
you know, kicked out of classes every now and then, and yeah.
I think it's a rite of passage. I think if you're not kicked out of at least one class.
Well, I was kicked out of one on the third day of the class. I never went back. And then, of course, the June report cards are coming out, and I'm thinking, oh boy, I'm going to pay for this one. And the nun passed me.
Oh my.
I
Oh
was
my.
shocked. I was shocked.
So favor was shining on you.
It was home
even
economics,
then.
by the way.
Oh,
And I still don't cook to this
Yeah.
day, so,
I knew there was a reason I liked you. I knew
yeah.
cooking's overrated. So, you know, you mentioned with Paula, someone that was there to, you mentioned sometimes on the floor, and certainly, you know, as I kind of wrote in the promotion, folks know successful Cindy, and they know about you really achieving the bottom line and elevating the bottom line, which is, you know, kind of a interesting turn of phrase, but there have been some challenges. There have been some serious personal challenges, and you know, I think as humans, it is not necessarily in those mountaintop experiences. It really is the lived experiences in the valley and the moving up through the valley that a lot of those experiences, and you certainly have had some. So I want you to share, as you feel comfortable, how that impacted you personally, your family, and also how it also influences and impacts how you lead today.
Mhm. I think the thing in my life that has had the biggest impact on my leadership skills is the fact that I became a mother. And life changes when you become a parent, truly changes for the good. And my whole life, the only thing I really knew is I was going to be a mom.
Right.
That's what I knew. I really, you know, you want 4 kids, and you want 2 boys and 2 girls, and you pick out the names, and you're going to buy a house, and you're going to live in Loudonville, and
Sure.
you know, all these great things. But I always knew I was going to be a mom. And so you can imagine my first really big test in life was when I found out I couldn't have children. And I was a little bit older in life. And I was devastated. But I said, all right, no, we can have kids. There's a way we can do this.
Sure.
And it is really hard. So we did in vitro, didn't work, and it was very expensive at the time. No health insurance covered it.
Right.
And so we went through it twice, and it was about $50,000. And fortunately, my mother-in-law was very gracious to help. And we had to make a decision. Do we do in vitro a third time, or do we save our money and adopt? And so we decided to adopt. At the time I was with Citibank, and has anybody in here ever adopted a child? Okay. It is a very challenging thing to do, and there are adoption agencies all over the country, and you pick one, and you sign up with them, and maybe you'll get a baby.
Okay.
And I thought, I'm going to treat this like a business, and I looked at it like if I were starting a business, and I don't mean to sound cold about it, but it's such an emotional roller coaster to be told that you can't have a child, and now suddenly the state of New York is going to decide whether I'm qualified
Sure.
to be a parent, and
Sure.
truly that's what they do. The county, the state, and And then I'm a relationship person. I wanted a relationship with whoever it was that I was going to choose to be my adoption partner.
Sure.
I researched for a year. I found a small adoption agency in Clifton Park, New York. I found out who the doctor was that was the pivot at the top, and I went in search of people that might know him.
Right.
And I got a personal introduction to this adoption agency. My husband and I went up in January 1992. We learned about it, we met the people there, went home, we decided, all right, let's sign up. We paid our application fee. We started the process, and this is the process where you have to have you go through a home study, which is a couple months process and background checks, and then somebody sends out everything to the state of New York, and they decide whether you're qualified as a parent. And that all came back at the end of April of '92, and then they said, well, maybe 5 years. Now we're in our late 30s, maybe 5 years. And just 3 months later, they called us up and said, congratulations, you have a baby boy. So, yeah. So, and then a year later, we adopted a baby girl. That whole process, I think, of taking the emotion out of it, controlling what I could control, was another turning point for me and a learning lesson, and I've carried that forward with me. There's a lot that we do at the Business Review and that I've done in other parts of my career. Can't control it. I can't control if somebody's going to quit. Right? If we're doing all the right things at the Business Review and we're maintaining we have a great culture there. Mike and I collaborate on all of the hirings. I don't hire anybody for any position unless Mike is involved in the decision, and he's the same way. Because it's important that they have the right set of skills, but it's equally as important that they get along with the other people in the office.
Sure.
If they're going to be disruptive or they're going to be the big ego in the room, it doesn't work.
Right.
So I think that control what you can control has always worked out very well for me.
Control. So what you're saying about the culture, you started out in a relational, your upbringing, your neighborhood, the families that you knew, that was a culture that was very relational.
Yes.
And you, I think that gave you the confidence to be able to stand. You believed in yourself, and you knew, yeah, that's going to work for me. No, it's not. And you took that into your career, and the experiences that you learned, the affirmation that you got, allowed you to now create the culture that you have with the Business Review, which is, gone through, it's shifted, and it as you talk about, you can walk into a building, you can walk into an office, and especially an office like yours, where the real estate is open, and you can very quickly get a sense, there's a vibe or a sense of the way the people feel about being there. And I've not ever gone into the Business Review, whether it's to get a copy of of something, where I wasn't greeted with a smile, where people that turn around and look and they're smiling, not like, you're bothering me, what are you doing here? And that comes from the top.
Yeah.
People are very, very comfortable there. That relational culture that you build is a success, a culture of success that you've built. And that was something that you, I think, translate into, there's a feel about the Business Review now. It's always been a wonderful publication. It's always been very helpful. It's always been informative. But now there's an elegance to it. And I think that, again, that's something that has been cultivated and created. So for folks that may be watching, folks in the audience and people that will see the tape that we're doing, how can they begin to build that sense of, even what you just said about taking the emotion out of things. For women in particular, I think that is a skill to be coveted, a skill that will make us very, I think, add to our success. So how if I'm someone that I want to start a company, I want to start a business, or I'm just in my workaday, I'm a part of a company, how can I go about cultivating the types of skills that you have? They're more than skills, they're really characteristics. Culture-based. I think it all trickles down to culture.
I think treating people as you'd want to be treated in a work environment, and being inclusive. I am a big believer that people should know where they stand at all times. There should be no gray area about performance or expectations. And in fact, before people are hired, when I go through the hiring process with them, I'm having those conversations with them at or during the interviewing process. The first interview is all about them and their skills. The second interview is really more interactive about the expectations of the culture. So they come in understanding that we're going to be very clear what the expectations are. We don't expect everybody to come in and do a perfect job from day one, but do you have that desire, that passion, that fire in your belly to learn and want to grow with us? I think the Business Review, it is a great publication. I'm saying that because I'm told that at least 3 times a day. I'm tomorrow, Mike and I have lunch with Tom and Mel here. And one of the very first questions I ask all of the CEOs is, how's the Business Review doing? And they all say the same thing. It's great. I love it. And here's why. And so we know we're on the right track, but does that mean that we're so perfect that we don't have room to grow? So if we're going to grow our product, we have to grow our team.
Our people,
We are truly a team. So we've made, this is May, right? May 31st. We haven't gotten to June yet, but we've made 6 of 6 months. We haven't gotten to the 6th month yet, but we've made 6 of our 6 months. And it's not just our ad revenue team. It's because Mike and his team give us this phenomenal product to sell. And the ad revenue team, they meet with Mike every Friday morning because Mike helps them understand the value proposition of what we do. So we're all on the same page.
What is the value proposition for the Albany Business Review?
So it's, we are the only source to receive business news, business leads. We stick to that. And people, our readers, our audience value what we deliver to them. And so there are daily newspapers. You don't know what you're going to get in there. Some days you get more ads than you do stories. Some days you don't want to read it because the stories are not happy stories. Or, we tell the stories like it is. We don't take sides of it. We just give the facts. And so there's not a lot of gray area in what we do. So people trust us. They value us. They have access to us. Mike gets letters to the editors all the time. He's on the phone with them. I get calls, mostly good calls. Our events keep us very accessible. So as a team of people, we're very accessible. But you don't see a lot of repetition in what we do. You see a continuation. We get stories from people, and Mike's been at the Business Review for 18 years now, and he's had people call him up and say, because of stories that you published in the Business Review, I made a connection and I bought a building that now houses my business, or I merged with somebody and now we have this great business partnership. So I could go on forever about what we do at the Business Review. But basically, if you boil it down to one word, it's all about connections. We help people connect.
And even again, and I know I keep circling back to, I can't move away from the relational piece and the connect, because I think all of that is part of that thread of what really the Business Review represents, what it brings to. There was something that you mentioned when we spoke earlier. It was a phrase that you used, and you said that humanizing leadership. So
I'm not going to be successful if Mike's not successful, if his weakest person on his team is not successful, and if Todd's not successful, I'm not going to be successful. So it's in mine and Mike's best interest to make sure that our team is growing. and that we're doing everything we can to coach them.
Right.
And there's a difference between coaching somebody and counseling them.
Sure.
Counseling them is, I've coached you for as long as I can, and I can't coach you anymore, and now I'm going to counsel you, which means within 90 days we either have to see it turn around, or let us, I've had to do that with people before, but I've actually helped them find a new position that they might be better fitted for.
Sure. Better suited.
Coaching has to be very consistent, and it has to be real. Sometimes it's hard to deliver it, and it always has to be followed up with, if you'd like to be here,
Right.
and right now you're here, let's talk about how you get there.
So
And
that
I'm not,
pathway.
yeah, and I'm not big on telling people how to do it, because it sort of defeats their growth.
Right.
So, you know, Todd is a great example. We've been working for weeks on him developing a process plan for himself. It'd be very easy for me to say, just do this, this, and this.
Sure.
But he's, over the last 6 weeks, he's done a remarkable job of figuring it out for himself. And he hasn't missed his revenue in
Since,
15 months?
April of 2017.
Right. He hasn't missed his revenue. And he grows it month over month because he's growing as a part of our team. And Mike's got it. I was talking about Chelsea Diana. When I came on board, Chelsea was still fairly new. She's thriving now. She's really a phenomenal writer for us.
Right.
And that's because we all have the same mantra of how we want to interact with our team. We're part of it.
Right.
You know, I just happen to be the one that, from my boss, who happens to be basically the number two guy at the company, I'm the one getting the pats on the
Sure,
back.
sure.
But I'm also the one saying, let me
Yes.
tell you,
Yeah.
your job's at risk
Yeah,
here,
yeah.
right? Which I got last year.
Yeah.
I wanted to do something that was unheard of. And my boss said to me, go for it. It's your job. And your job's at risk. And what I did was I counseled out 4 of 5 of our sales team. We had a team of 5, and I counseled out 4 of them.
Canceled out.
Counseled,
Counseled out.
meaning help
that
them
great
find their way to
news.
leave.
Okay.
And this all happened within a 2-week period. So
Wow.
now it's March,
Yeah.
and we've been making our numbers every month,
Sure.
and now I have no sellers.
Sure.
So, but I'm, you know,
So
the Albany Business Review, to me, it's always be recruiting. So I'm a big believer in meeting people and keeping my bench full.
Right.
And I could see this day was coming. I thought I had a strong bench, and one person that was on my bench got hired. She's phenomenal. The other 2 people on my bench were no longer available, but through them and through my contacts, got referred to somebody else who hired him, and he referred me to somebody, hired her, and then the ad director just called in one day, and she had a work-from-home job. She worked for a company out of Chicago. She was in the automotive business. And she said, I saw that you're advertising for an events director. Just talking to this girl on the phone, I'm like, there's no way are you getting the events director role. You're going into my ad sales team. And she had never done selling before, but she's phenomenal.
Right.
And she doesn't know this yet, but she's being promoted tomorrow to ad director.
That's
So.
well, you know, what you said is
Don't tell her.
so very, and she won't see this because this will be a
Yeah.
little while before it comes out. But it's so interesting is having the ability to develop and see something. You said she was looking at one position,
Yes.
and perhaps didn't even see the possibility. But as you've grown, being able to look into your bench and see your oncoming bench, but also the team that you have existing, and you know, being able to make those hard decisions when it's time to counsel someone out, which I think is the most graceful term that I've ever heard. But that's important, to be able to make those hard choices.
It is.
And you've had to make hard choices.
You
You've
do.
learned to make
Every day.
hard choices, and that is a part of life. It
Yeah.
is a part of business. It's not something that we're able to step away from. I wanted to talk a bit about the industry, but I'm still drawn to the how you would say to someone, look, you're going to have to make some hard choices. You know, you're going to need to. It'll be helpful for you to take emotion out of that. But how those are to a certain extent cultivatable skills. And, you know, how might someone go about doing that?
It's really their communication style. It's not going to work for everybody, unfortunately. No offense to Mike, but he has his style, which I love for the role that he's in.
Right.
In my role as the pivot person
Yep.
that's responsible for the bottom line, my leadership position requires a different set of skills than his.
Sure.
And so for me, it was, first of all, you have to have the confidence to talk to people. And I learned, listen, people are not going to take out whips and chains and start beating you if you talk to them.
Sure.
And if they say no, okay, thank you, I appreciate your time. And so once you get over that fear of hearing no, okay.
Right.
You know, and that's the biggest thing that you overcome in sales is that no, okay, let me try it another way.
Right.
So, so I think a lot of it is natural, but I also believe people can learn if somebody is telling them, if you're talking with them and saying, you know, if you have a career path and you see where you want to be 3-4 years down the road, and I can help you get there, it's my responsibility to challenge them with the desire to change, the desire to soften their communication skill. When I was first in a leadership role, I was brutal. And when I was at Citibank, they called it, I'm sorry for my offensive language, but they called it the Cindy Bitch Club, right? Because it wasn't a derogatory comment.
Right.
It was just, I was getting the job done.
Sure.
And,
Sure.
it was like, come on, you owe me 8 hours of work, and
Sure.
you told me you're going out to call on, 15 clients today, or I would challenge them to put 15 business cards in their pocket. That was back in the day where we didn't have the technology. But business cards were important.
Sure.
And that's how you built your pipeline, was coming back with business cards and then working them. And so somebody came back, and they came back with 2. Well, I'm questioning, well, where were you today? Well, I was out calling on people, and okay, well, walk me through exactly, when you left here, where did you go? Well, I went to ABC Awning. Well, how'd you drive there? And how did you do this? Because I wanted people to realize that there's an accountability piece to what we all do.
Sure.
We're all accountable. You accept a job within an organization, be accountable to what the company's goals are. Participate, be accountable. But sometimes you have to tell somebody that's an expectation of the job. Not everything can come up in the interview process.
Sure.
But you have to be very open and honest. And I rarely I say, because if I said I never miss my one-on-ones, Todd would say, you're full of it. So that's sacred time, though.
Right.
Because it's time you get to sit and talk about these
Sure.
things in a very non-threatening environment.
Sure.
And I'm sharing things that I've learned.
Right.
Right?
So it sounds like what would be helpful for anyone, wherever they are, a student, wannabe-preneur, know yourself. And if you don't know yourself, then learn yourself. Because in those steps, it will enable you to kind of, and have a willingness of spirit to be able to receive what may perhaps be some harsh counsel about, that's kind of working for you, or no. But it sounds like you've set you let people know what the expectations are, because it's kind of hard to meet a mark or generate metrics if you don't know what those. But really, if you're a company owner, make sure that your expectations are very clear, so that folks know what they're supposed to do. And on the staff side, to have that kind of or develop that openness and that willingness. You talked about having a fear of failure in the beginning, and yet you surmounted that to, you kind of stared it in the face.
Oh, I still, every day I go in, and I had a one-on-one conference call with my boss Tuesday, I think it was, and he said to me, "How you doing?" Now, most people would say, "Well, we're great.
Right.
You know, we've made 6 out of 6 months. I don't see any risk for the rest of the year. We have this one area that is a little weak that we're working on," and he's been aware of it, sort of some inherited issues.
Sure.
And I said to him, "Well, I'm good." He said, "Well, why aren't you great?" I said, "Because I don't want to get comfortable." Right? I don't want to get comfortable, because if I get comfortable, my entire team's going to get comfortable.
Right.
I need to continue pushing, because I need them to push themselves and to push each other to get just a little bit better every day.
Right.
And I would just go back and say one other thing. Counseling is your last resort. No one should ever be surprised when you start the counseling process. Because if you're meeting with your team regularly or your partner regularly, and you're sharing that honest feedback about your observations, and you understand what their career path is, and you're helping them get there, they're either taking it to heart and you're seeing progress,
Right.
they're hitting their goals, they're contributing. If not, you have to say that to them. You have to say, "This isn't working. This part isn't working, and we need it to work." And if it's not working, you could ultimately lose your job here.
Everything.
And-
Or a business
Right,
if you're.
but I also say, I don't want you to feel threatened by that.
Right.
But I do want you to feel some pressure.
Right.
I need you to step up your game. And if you decide during the next 90 days that you really can't, then that's okay. Tell me. I'll help you find another job.
Right.
I don't want you, I don't like to terminate anybody.
Sure.
And I've had to do that, and it's no fun. But I don't think anybody that has been with me over a period of time, I don't think when they've struggled to grow, and at some point they've reached the max that they can grow, which happens.
Right.
There's some people that their skill set will develop just to a certain point.
Sure.
And the organization is growing, and as you're bringing in new people and they're moving past your other people, you have to have these hard conversations, because it is in that employee's best interest to understand where they're at relative to their peers.
Right.
And know that they've stopped growing.
Sure.
And so I'm a big believer in honest, open communication.
Right.
I don't, we're moving our office space.
Okay.
And when we started the process, we were very open with the team. We pulled them into the conference room. We said, "Listen, our lease is up. We can stay here. We can look around. If we look around, what would you like?" They got really into it. They started a Google Docs around the office, and they sent back to me about 10 things that they wished for. So I said, "Mike, come on, you're part of this. I need you to be part of this process." And Mike and I went out and looked at space. We were fortunate we liked the same space. And it met almost everything on that list. And we're very happy with it.
Which is wonderful.
We just finished the floor plan, and it is, I just think we've just improved so much.
It's exciting.
We have a great space now, but this is just, can't wait. And now everybody knows. Everybody knows that we're moving. We announced it to the team yesterday, and they're all excited.
Right.
Now the cleanup has to start too. Yeah.
Well,
So-
because you kept everyone engaged in the process, not just informed,
Right.
but engaged.
Engaged in the process, and I think it's so important. And even, we've made 6 out of 6 months. So I decided, this is just such a great team. And when you're in business, you can't always give people money, because you just can't. The business can't afford it. We're a small business. We have very small margins. And but what we can do is we can give them the gift of time.
Sure.
It's summer, so from now till the end of June, we close at 3:30.
Very nice.
But I challenged everybody, because again, Mike's team, they write the product that we sell.
Sure.
And so they're a big part of it.
Sure.
And then the ad sales team goes out and sells. So I said, well, if
Sure.
you meet your July goal by June 15th, then we'll just do the rest of the summer at 3:30. And so now everybody's
A nice
engaged.
goal, sure,
right?
absolutely.
So,
Engaged and not informed. I want to leave a couple minutes for folks to have an opportunity to ask some questions. So, who's got a question? I'm
yes.
gonna go over here.
Okay.
And then I'll come
Cindy,
to you,
thanks for
Jamil.
sharing everything you have. You mentioned earlier that one of your regrets is not going to college.
Mhm.
And I'm curious why.
I wonder what I could have accomplished if I had gone to college. And I've loved every job that I've had. I've had 4 jobs, I think 4 jobs, maybe 5. And I've loved every one of them, and I've been with them long term. You know, I don't think I ever went into a job and quit. I think the shortest one I had was probably 7 or 8 years. It was with a startup. And I don't know, it's just something inside of me that says, what could have? You know, what could I have accomplished? But I don't dwell on it. I can't control it. So I don't dwell on it. It seeps into my brain every now and then. So, yeah. And, you know, somewhere around my midlife crisis, I thought, I should be a prosecutor. I would have made a great prosecuting attorney.
And you still could be. You still could be.
I'm not. You know, I can't say the R word because Mike and I have an agreement we won't say the R word together. We're in this for the long haul.
Right.
You know, and I'm the market president and publisher.
Sure.
But I'm telling you, I can't run that newspaper without Mike. So we are equal partners. And I sent out an email today, and I went over to him and I said, "Is it okay if I sign your name to this email?" "What is it?" I said, "It's really bad. I'm not going to put my name on it." But it wasn't. It was a congratulatory email telling the team how proud we were of all that they've accomplished this year, and you know, recognizing the editorial team, the audience team, the ad sales team, the events for all of their contributions. So you've got to give that balance of good with, I don't use the word negative. You'll rarely hear negative feedback. It's constructive, because constructive helps you grow.
Right.
But that's, I can't really, it just, you know, midlife crisis somewhere, and it just stuck with me.
Brad,
So,
thank you. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your stories. I appreciate your passion, your work ethic, and your hustle. What is the point where you decide, all right, this person doesn't need more coaching, or this person needs coaching and not counseling?
Everybody needs coaching. It should be a routine part of your career. And if you're a business owner, you should find a mentor. You should have a mentor. I have a mentor. And I've had the same mentor for probably 15 years. Now, he's a little mad at me right now, but because I haven't called him lately. But he's a very significant person in the community, and I've known him. He's known me really since I was a nobody. And he is the reason I'm at the Business Review, because when they called me up and they said, you know, we'd like to consider you a candidate, I'm like, no way, I don't get published. I don't know what a publisher does.
Right.
And I was very happy at Time Warner, great company. I know nobody likes to write their check to them, but I wasn't in that world. I was in their media side. I sold their air. And I called them up and I said, you know, the Albany Business Review is calling me, and I knew Carolyn, and I knew what a great job she had always done. And I said, they're calling me, and they'd like me to consider being the publisher. And he said, you should do that. Why? I don't know why. He sends me 157 pages, like 3 days later. He says, read this. I said, I'm not reading that. It's too much work. And I said, dumb it down for me. He's a retired doctor. I said, dumb it down for me, doc. He dumbs it down for me, and he just basically said, you should do this. And here I am. So, but I believe everybody should be coached and coaching all the time. As a leader of a business or a leader of people, you should always be able to read your people and see, sort of project out the future. Is the person achieving the KPIs that you have put in place for your organization to continue on the growth path? Is the person putting forth the same effort that everyone else is? Is the person, now I deal mostly in sales, that's been my world, and I'm really good at it. I'm really good at it. I'm really good at knowing who's slacking and who's not. So because I can see that, I can stop it before it gets too far. I can say, listen, here are some things that I've noticed about you in the last week. I don't want to wait 90 days, because then what happens? It's habit for them,
Sure.
right? So you want to be able to give, that's still coaching, that's not counseling. Counseling is, when you don't have that conversation, now it's 90 days later, and your business is going to blow up because you can't make your goals, because this person is not contributing.
Right.
That's a problem, that's more of a leadership problem. And so the coaching needs to be, it needs to be constant.
Exactly.
And if you are an entrepreneur, you work by yourself, find a mentor. There are so many people in this marketplace that would love to give the gift of their time and their knowledge. It's amazing.
Thanks, Chevelle. Anyone else?
I have an observation more than a question. You were talking about not the fear of failure helped you, but at one point you also said you were not afraid to hear the word no when you went out as a salesperson. So I've experienced both sides of the fear of failure, and I think it's a mixed blessing. I came to the United States when I was a full-blown adult, redid college, and of course I came from a very different culture from India, where the fear of failure is a huge thing. The reason I was able to continue to, and I learned that failing is not such a terrible thing in the US as it is in India, and that's something that helped me
That's right.
continue in my journey. Because when you uproot yourself as an adult who's mid-career, comes to a different country where skills are not transferable, and even if they are, credentials are not transferable because recommendations are not verifiable, and then there is a recession, and then there is another recession, all kinds of bottlenecks that you face, then fear of failure takes on a whole new meaning here. And the only thing that actually helped me was that fear of failure was not such a terrible thing in the US
Sure.
as it was for me from the mother country that I came from, the country that I came from, where in India, it would prevent me from attempting something.
Yeah.
It would keep me from attempting something.
Yeah.
Here it didn't. Fear of failure is that you can rationalize it to mean that, hey, the market doesn't need this. So you transfer your skills, or the resources need to be redeployed in some other area.
And I
That's
think-
what the market is signaling to you.
The fear of failure is in my head, and it's my driver. But I have failed many times, and I have learned a lot from those failures. Some of them are business failures, and some of them are personal failures. You know, sometimes you feel, I never wanted to fail being a mom, but I've had moments where I have failed being a mom. And I've never wanted to fail at business, but I've had bad days, bad months, and bad years. Never together, thank God, because you learn and you can course correct. But it drives me because now I'm always forward thinking. So it's how you use the things that are in your head, how you use that. I don't allow it to paralyze me. I had a brain tumor 10 years ago, and 4 years ago, cancer. And this is a true story. I was in the operating room for the brain tumor, and doctor says to me, God, your blood pressure is so normal. I said, well, I don't have anything to be nervous about. He says, well, you're gonna have brain surgery. I'm gonna cut your head open, and you're gonna lose hearing. I said, I know, but you're the one whose blood pressure should be up. He goes, why? I said, well, I'm not gonna know if I die, but you gotta live with that for the rest of your life, right? And so for me, it was a fear, but I can't control it. I'm either gonna be awake or, I felt like I was dead when I woke up, I'll tell you. And even when I got diagnosed with cancer, okay, bring it on. What do we need to do? I want to get back to work. For the first 4 months of my treatment of cancer, never missed a day of work. Never. And then I had to, because I went through a stem cell transplant, I had to be out for 90 days. With the brain tumor, they said my recovery time was 6 months, and I said to my doctor, not happening. I'll be back to work in 90 days. He said, no, you won't. I said, want to bet? And I'm very good friends with this doctor today. In fact, he was one of our achievers. I didn't have anything to do with that, but when he won, I was like, Mike. And Mike knows the doctor very well as well. But I said to him, I will be back to work in 90 days. And so the week before, like 3 days, 4 days before the 90th day, I said, I want to go back to work. And he said, I can't recommend it. Tell me why. And he said, because most people, it's 5 or 6 months. And I said, I'm not most people. I mean, shouldn't I know what my limitations are? And so we made a pact that if I went back to work and I couldn't handle it, he would put me out again. I never looked back on that. With cancer, I have an incurable cancer. I live with it every day. I take chemo 21 days of every month. It's not going to slow me down. It's not going to rule my life. The deafness in one ear, it's not going to rule my life. It's, you know, we talked about it before we came up here. I said, you have to sit over there. I get to sit in the gray chair because this is my deaf ear. And when Mike and I go out to lunch, I was like, well, he now knows which side he has to sit on. But my entire team knows where they need to sit. If I'm going out somewhere with Paula, she drives because if I drive, I can't hear her talk. So people in my world have adapted to, I'd like to say handicap, but it's not. I only allow it to be a handicap if it's, you know, my company can tick off they can tick off one of the little things, oh, she's handicapped, whatever. So, but no, fear of failure is just, it's not paralyzing for me. For me, it's something, it's a driver, and not a negative driver, it's a positive driver. So.
That's awesome.
So you said your management style changed.
Yep.
Before or after the adoption?
After, and if you're a parent, you know, the first time you see that child, love becomes different for you. It's like a love that you can never imagine. If, you know, you love your husband, you love your significant other, you know, whatever it is. You love your brothers, you love your mother. But a baby, it's totally different. And until you experience it, and it softened me a lot, and it made me think deeper about how I wanted to communicate with my team. So I realized that being more soft-spoken, you know, I'm tiny, but I grew up, I'm the only girl in my generation in my family, so I've always had to have a strong voice, and I was a major tomboy, so if my brothers could play football, well, I'm playing football. If they're gonna jump out of trees, I'm gonna jump out of a tree. And so, true stories, we did all of that. When we played Red Rovers with a knife, you know, I did it. So my brothers were all big athletes, and I could play basketball as well as anybody back in the day, not so much anymore. But I think I maybe overcompensated for my short and petite, and you know, Skylar looks like he's like 18 years old, and I suffered from the same problem. When I was in my 20s, I looked like I was 12, and so there was a credibility issue. And when you're dealing with, I'm this little tiny petite thing, and one of the gentlemen on my team is like this big football player guy, and he's like, he's not going to listen to me. And well, that's fine. You don't have to listen to me, but if you're not going to listen to me and we're not going to be able to work together, you're out the door. And so I think being a parent makes you realize that, you know what, you can still have that soft voice and still get your point across with love and kindness. And but I still have, you know, I still have a strong voice. I'm still very honest, and I don't mince words. I want people to clearly understand what I'm saying when we're talking about performance and productivity. So
It's a possibility coaching gets better when counseling out isn't a very good option.
Yeah, yeah, it does. And when you talk to people in the interviewing process and you lay a lot of that out, they have a lot of cause to stop and really think, right? Because if they know themselves, and you can see it in the resumes too, right? You're probably not gonna bring in somebody from your organization that has job hopped 15 jobs in 10 years, 18 months, 9 months, 13 months, and no growth. That's not the person that I'm bringing in. I'm typically bringing in somebody that has a history of growth. You really have to get good at reading resumes. And if you can interpret resumes, then you know the right conversations to have during the interviewing process. But being able to put out there the fact that your sales job, you still have to be here at 8, you still have to work till 5, and you have to be accountable for your time. And that word accountability is big with me, very big. I'm accountable to my boss is accountable to his boss is accountable to the owner of this mega corporation that we ultimately work for. So, it comes down to honesty and integrity and openness, being honest.
Anyone else have another question? We'll transition and we're able to hang out here for a while still. So if you don't get the chance to answer questions, because I know we're taping, and so we'll leave that, and we can, if there's no other open questions, we'll go into the next portion of our enjoyable or eating portion. But Cindy, I just wanted to, as I'm very congested now, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for just taking the time. You are incredibly busy. You've got a lot of things that are going on, and we heard about some of that, especially it's people focused, whether it's your family or your work family, your team that you're working with. So I really, really appreciate you being able to just share very transparently about how some of the ways that you've got to the place that you are, and how you've helped lead the Business Review into its legacy organization at this point.
I didn't do any of that, though. I really didn't. I'm fortunate I picked up a really good team.
You picked up good rates, but I think a lot of people could have picked them up, but they wouldn't have been able to accomplish
I think
what you have.
They elevated the ad revenue team, but
Yeah.
I really have to say the product really does speak for itself, and
Yeah.
Mike has done an amazing job
Yeah, absolutely.
with our writers, and Todd does a great
Sure.
job taking care of the audience.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
So I
Great.
wanted-
Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I wanted to say thank you to my amazing videographer, Jamel Mosley with Melly Media, and of course Pioneer Bank. I'm peeking at
Yes.
Samantha and the new team members that I'm excited to work with, Michaela and Skylar, and of course without all of you here, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much
Thank you.
for sharing. And I think we have a wrap. Great.
Thank you.